The business of professional wrestling. Let's talk about this week because money matters. That's why professional wrestling exists, so that wrestlers entertain fans and wrestlers make money for doing their job. Speaking of doing the job, Casey Thompson did his fair share, and that's why he created the In-Ring Wrestling podcast. Casey, on an average week, as you were at your busiest, just from wrestling matches, not from selling gimmicks, not from doing anything else, just for wrestling, how much were you making in a given week when you were at your busiest?
Yes, 1,500 a week, 2,000 sometimes, depending.
That's a pretty good living.
Yeah.
All right.
I was fortunate.
That's a good living to have. And professional wrestling can be lucrative, successful. You could take care of your family, do whatever. By the way, I want to welcome you officially to the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. The host, Casey Thompson. I'm Kevin Kelly. And what we try to do each and every week is we focus on the other side. So many podcasts, and rightfully so, they talk about the stars and the storylines and the WWE and the current product. A lot of times, we'll turn the camera around to the opposite side of the ring, to the, not necessarily the star, but the star maker. And when I read the news, Casey, that my pal, R-Truth, Ron Killings, was getting released, that's what I said. I said, a star maker is getting released, and this is one of the economic realities of wrestling. How do you feel about? Yeah.
There's a lot of uproar on the internet over it.
No shit.
A lot of people unhappy. But, I mean, they say all good things have to come to an end. Unfortunate, what he's been there for 17 years, that's a hell of a run.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's what, 53 years old? He's my age, so I only can imagine how he's feeling. I know how I feel when I wake up in the morning at 53 years old, but I'm sure he's going to miss the paycheck. Hopefully he was smart with his money, what he made, and invested some of it where he can go. I mean, he still has a power behind his name for the indies overseas. I mean, maybe AEW, TNA, which he had a big run there for years. So, it's I'm sure he'll end up somewhere.
Right. And I think that part of it was, now again, they didn't just outright release him. The story is that WWE offered Ron a new contract, and the two sides couldn't come to an agreement. What kind of, did they say, we will pay you, Ron Killings, 15 cents for your services? And Ron said, no, that's ridiculous. And they said 15 is all we're going to offer, just 15 cents. And he said, well, I quit.
Would it be smart of them to put him under a Legends contract where he can still be part of the show and then still go and do independence and things like that?
I think everything is on the table. And again, depending on how negotiations go, and I have a feeling that it probably wasn't adversarial. By the way, sidebar story here, that Terry Taylor and I worked together in talent relations. And it was while we were in talent relations together that we grabbed a few tapes from the hopefuls who were trying to get jobs. And we saw a tag team from North Carolina. And one of the members of that tag team, one of that members of the tag team was Ron Killings, who I think was called K Crush in the tag team, then was changed to K Quick, then became R-Truth with an NWA title run.
Kelly gave Ron Killings his start in WWE.
Sure, if that's the way.
This is our show. We're going with that.
I know. I said to Terry, Terry Taylor, all your years of experience in this industry, can you not see this gold mine of talent? And Terry Taylor said, thank you, Kevin, for your wisdom in your young years here. And it was, he passed the eye test. He was young, muscular, explosive, charismatic. He had everything you could want. And, his tag team partner was fine. And when Terry made the call, and I was there when he called Ron, that it was, we're looking at you,
just for
not
you.
necessarily your partner. So,
This is our show, and it is professional wrestling. So
yes,
every story has a little bit of an embellishment to it. So I do tell everyone that I got Norman Smiley his job with WWE with NXT as a trainer because I was on my phone one day with Joe Gomez, a buddy of mine, and he's like, "Hey, Kidman just got hired by WWE to be a trainer, and this is how much he's making a year, and this and that. They're looking for another one more trainer." He says, "But they have to move to Tampa, where it's going to be, because I guess that's when Kern was taking over or
right.
whatnot." So the first person I said, "Oh, you know who would be great for that? Would be Norman Smiley." He's like, "Oh yes, I love Norman. If you know Joe Gomez, And so the first thing I did, I hung up the phone. I called Norman. I said, "Hey, Norman, this is the deal. Kidman just got hired. You'd be perfect for this. You have to move to Tampa. This is the payday they're paying him off the start. This and that." He's like, "Okay, thanks." I said, "If you get the job, I'm telling everyone I got you that job." And he just laughed. He said, "Okay, Casey." And it's been 20 years now, maybe. He's
Right.
still there.
Hey, listen, if it paid interest to you, if it paid, if you had to pay an annual, you'd be cashing a check for a long, long time. And it
Yeah,
was wonderful. So, and it was wonderful then to see Ron kind of move through the system. When Ron came in, the developmental was changing a little bit because they had started Memphis. They had gotten away from they still had Louisville, but they opened up Memphis, but then Memphis was kind of like zigzag in and out who's running it. And he didn't get lost in the shuffle. And part of that was his relationship with Brian James. I think they clicked right away,
yeah,
and that was how they were able to launch him on the main product and then sustain it kind of going forward. Economic realities, though.
yeah,
Do you? So if you're running WWE and you've got to look at the budget, Casey, and 20 years ago you got Norman Smiley his job,
yeah,
and you have to look at the numbers and call Norman in the office one day, and you know where the cut needs to be made, and unfortunately it's the guy that you hired.
yeah.
How difficult is that for you? Is that a conversation you could have? What would that be like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be difficult, because there is a built relationship for many years with myself and, said person, Norman Smiley. We're just hypothetically putting in there. Um, I think any person they have to release is kind of hard. No one likes to be the bearer of bad news. And, you're taking someone that's getting a check every 2 weeks in the box, already deposited in the account. And you're saying, "Hey, we're giving you your 90 day,
Yeah.
so 90 days, you're done." You're going from making, I would imagine he's making a great living, going to having a 90 days, nothing. I'm sure his downside guarantees even, livable off of, because I don't believe he's been, we're talking about our truth here. I don't believe he's been very active over the years. I think he's, they put him in little spots here and there. I hear he's really good for the backstage, for the morale. Everyone really likes him and all that. Maybe that might turn into him, getting an office job, being a producer or an agent or whatever they're calling him this week.
Yeah, this week. I have a feeling that R-Truth is going to find uh, an available market for him that's going to be uh, livable and doable, and he's going to
Yeah,
find people. People will be tripping over themselves wanting to bring him in because he is so damn entertaining. Um, but it is kind of the reality too of the fact that WWE is not doing live events anymore, Casey. That a lot of the card fillers, the second tier wrestlers, not the main eventers,
sure.
but the second tier guys and girls. I have a feeling that there's going to be more cuts coming and more releases and more difficult conversations come contract renewal time, because if
Sure.
you're not getting TV time on a TV company, then what are we there for? To be used
No, those are the
occasionally?
guys. Yeah, those are the guys building. They have built the company too, because they're the ones hitting the pavement out there all the time, doing all the house shows. They've taken that whole element out of their scheduling, so they're going from being a wrestling company to being just like WCW was and a television show.
Right.
So there's a lot of people, and going back to what you're saying, our truth is going to find himself somewhere. Me being a former promoter, running my own wrestling company, and now you going to be running your own. This is how I had to look at things. The ROI, the return on investment.
Right.
Guys coming right off of TV have such an inflated price because they're used to get paid from the big machine. Now you're going down, 5,000 degrees to
Yeah.
an independent, or and that's just the reality of what it is. So sometimes they were like, yeah, I want $15,000 to come and wrestle for you, and it's like, get the fuck out of here. Not to be rude or
Yep.
anything, but what's the return? And I'll say to them, okay, I'll pay you 15,000. If you don't draw me 15,000, you're working for free. You want to do that? Oh, well, just my name. You have to look at, and sometimes promoters get the bad name, the bad rap of being the bad guy. But in the end, they have to look at the return on the investment. And because when you're with WWE, there's a few guys that draw on their own, but the majority of it, and this is my opinion, the majority of it is being the WWE universe
Right.
as a whole that is drawing. There's no individual guys. There's a couple guys that will draw, making it worthwhile on an independent show for that high, inflated price that think they're worth, or everyone's worth what they believe, but what it all depends what the promoter's worth paying.
And again, the price does come down. So you can ask for 15. I've heard guys ask for 25, 25, and that number comes down to 15, and then it's 10, 5, and then whatever. If you're willing to pay, $1,000 to $1,500 for a named talent to come in that's going to add some validity to your show, then if
Sure.
you could cover it, bring it in. And obviously that's a good payday for anybody. Certainly not what they wanted originally, but nevertheless, Matt Cardona is a perfect example. He's a guy who gets his price, who's no nonsense, no BS, works hard, comes in, does his job, does exactly what anybody would ever want, and is a proven commodity now on the independent ranks as a draw.
I saw him on another podcast, and the guy was like, so if someone meets your price, are you going to wrestle for them? Or do you have all these other conditions? It has to be this quality. He's like, yes. If they meet my price, of course I'm going to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I watched it and I was like, I kind of like this guy.
Yeah.
He's, kind of with it, kind of down to earth and everything.
And then when Cody Rhodes, was doing independence right after he asked for his release from WWE,
Right.
he was, again, not looking to get rich. He was looking to get reps and build reputation,
Sure.
rebuild his image, rebuild everything.
So he did it from the ground floor up.
Yeah, and lifted everybody, made everybody around him better, made every show that he was on better. And it came from a genuine place. It wasn't a work, and it worked.
Right.
And again, I think if you bring in an R-Truth into your locker room, you bring in a Ron Killings into your town, into your show, you're going to have there's going to be an audience there, both behind the curtain and outside. Good locker room guys, Casey, very important as well.
Absolutely.
Camaraderie, chemistry. When you're building a roster, when you're booking a show, how much do you factor that in, both positive and negative, with good locker room guys?
That's a really great question. Thinking back, to be honest, back when I did it, I didn't really use that formula. I just knew that my criteria was, first of all, they look like a wrestler. They act like a wrestler, so that's going to cover that part, I guess. And they know how to wrestle. I pretty much everyone I used, if you don't have wrestling gear, there's exceptions. Don't get me wrong. John Cena's not going to wear regular wrestling gear, but you can't have the whole entire roster wearing sneakers and, cut off jeans. So especially on the independents, perception is everything.
Right.
If you walk in, people walk in the building, they see nice lighting, they see the ring where the ring apron is completely straight, the tarp is tight, the ropes are tight, the chairs are all lined up perfectly. Right off the bat, they're looking and saying, "Wow, this looks good. This is, you got them right off the bat." Then you throw guys out there that look like wrestlers, and I don't even care if they can wrestle great, because you're going to mix it with someone that knows what they're doing, that can get them through it. In the overall presentation of the show, they leave entertained, and they're like, you know what, this was the real deal, because their guys look like wrestlers. Because I wanted guys who, when they're in that ring, the guy in the first row will say, you know what, looking up, I don't want to meet that guy in the alley, because he's going to kick
Right.
my ass. So you don't want to have a little guy in there, which there's, the landscape of wrestling is dramatically has changed over the years, because most guys in the first row can whip the guy's ass that's in the ring. They wouldn't have made it through the old days of the territories, where if you got in a bar fight, you got fired, if you
Yeah.
lost. So, yeah, I mean, I did, back to your original question, I did, it kind of factored into everything. I did have certain guys that I used that were my regulars, that I knew I could depend on them. Norman Smiley was one of them. I knew that the funniest thing is, when you're running TV, everyone wants to all this time to get their stuff in and everything, right? My experience, 90% of everyone out there will go under their time. They go
Okay.
home before you give them the cue. And I don't know why, because I guess they're, I don't know. It's just, that's my experience. So now I'm running, you're running the format of the runtime of the whole show, and I'm like, oh shit, I still have 23 minutes left, and my last segment was only supposed to be like 11 minutes. I'll go,
Yeesh.
hey Norman, I need another 10 out of you. Is that okay? He's always like, yeah, no problem, Casey, whatever you want. He was great, and he could fill it, and it would be entertaining. It would be, they'd keep people on the edge of their seat. It wouldn't be just like Gaga out there that people are like, the indie Gaga house show, Gaga show, I say.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So
especially on a TV show, because
right.
if Casey Thompson, I could put you in a ring today with another experienced guy, and I say, please give me some house show Gaga. You guys could do that and not take one bump.
20 minutes, we're not even touching each other, of course. But you don't want to see that on your weekly TV
No,
show.
it's not good for TV.
So, and that's what the thing was with working with a lot of younger independent guys, was trying to teach them there's a difference between wrestling that you would normally wrestle on an independent or a house show than wrestling a TV match.
Right.
A lot of them didn't know the difference. None of them knew what a hard camera was. They'd be looking off. I mean, even wrestling on TV out here, when Dusty was the booker up in WCW, he'd be yelling at everyone to look at the hard camera. So, and when you got in there, the referee would be like, the hard camera's right there. When you got in the ring, and still guys are looking the wrong way all the time. And
Yeah.
you're probably experienced with TV on that. That
Lots
was
I always
I
like
would
guys
imagine.
if I saw, even on an independent, so let's say snapmare rear chin lock, and the guy's starting to find it, and he's turning the guy, right? So as he's working the hold, the guy on the bottom is starting to scooch around. I always appreciated that, because at least they're trying. They're trying to get back into position. But yeah, it happens all the time, especially during promos with the back to the camera and the handheld in the ring chasing them. That drove Vince nuts. That drove
I
everybody
would
nuts.
imagine that Vince added extra camera angles to make up for that. If I was a fly on the wall, I bet you he did.
It was one of the reasons why they definitely had the handheld in the ring, not just to capture the close, tight facial shots, but also to Iggy the guy in the ring to spin around,
Hey,
wrap it up.
dumbass, the camera's right in front of your face.
Yeah. He gave me.
Oh wow.
So I had to do an interview with Ahmed Johnson.
Good luck.
Live in ring interview, not live, but live to tape. And Vince said, whatever the question was and whatever Ahmed was going to say, Kevin, if Ahmed doesn't say whatever I want him to say, just give him the office, little squeeze on the elbow. And yeah, sure, Vince, no problem. And so Ahmed I asked the question, Ahmed does his promo, it's going along fine. He's not saying the line, and I give him the office. And so I give him another quick question, and he's talking, and he doesn't say the line, and I give him the office again. It's a little squeeze on the elbow. Hey, remember, 3 times, and we're out. That's okay. He's not going to say it. Thank you very much, Ahmed Johnson. And he does his pose. They play his music, and I go back to the back. I walk through the curtain. The first thing says, "God damn, pal, didn't you give him the office?" I squeeze his elbow 3 times, Vince. What do you want? It's on TV. And if you find the interview somewhere on YouTube, you see me giving him the office and him not taking it.
Vince would use those wrestling terms like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It depended on the day of the week. Sometimes he was like, he would have super old school carny vernacular, and the next day he would be, I hate all that, where the industry came from. Ugh, all of those words. Oh, yeah, it just, you name it. One day, Casey, today you'd have too much hair. Tomorrow you wouldn't have enough hair. Whatever direction the wind would blow, whatever hair was up his ass, no pun intended, whatever side of the bed he got up on, that was the day. And it always changed. So you always had to be prepared for that. And you also couldn't go, hey, Vince, a couple of days ago you said that was great. How come 48 hours later now you say that that's crap? You never did that.
Say that to him.
No. Right. You just roll with the punches.
Right.
There was always a part of me that believed he knew what he was doing and that he was working people, just messing with us all, saying, up is down and then down is up, knowing full well that we knew which direction it was, and he was just getting over on us and having fun.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a lot of that going on.
Yeah. I never really...
anyone was smart to it, like Patterson or Briscoe?
I think Patterson was, definitely, and I'm sure Bruce was. When you work so closely with him, but Pat was one of the few who would call him out on his bullshit, and in private, not publicly. Right. But Pat would give it to him, tell him this is the way it is, and stop. Okay. And that's why a lot of the boys, that weren't necessarily Vince guys, like Bret Hart, for example, would go to Pat and had good relationships with Pat because they felt Pat understood them, and would go to Vince and give Vince the unvarnished truth and come back with whatever Vince's response was, again, with no polish on it. This is what he said. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like you because, or whatever. Right. That was Pat.
Speaking of Vince, do you think now that he's gone and, Triple H is the boss, do you think back in the day Vince would not even register anything that's on the internet, correct?
Again, it depended on the day.
Right.
It depended on his mood.
For the most part, I mean, he wouldn't, he doesn't react to that kind of stuff. He doesn't make his decisions on what people are saying out there, right? He does is in his mind.
He would spoof pop culture or whatever was the headline of the day, but not necessarily make what they're saying about us is that we're, cheap and we don't care about the fans and we're getting rid of any vestige of Vince or whatever they might say. Nah, he wasn't like that. He was interested in making money and selling tickets and pay-per-view.
Now, do you think Triple H is that same way? So there's a lot of internet buzz going on about R-Truth and being let go. Do you think they will change their mind because of that? Or you think it's like, this is the decision we made? Or you do hear people saying, well, it wasn't even Triple H. He didn't have the choice. It came from, TKO. Because when you're on the internet, and we talk about everything we see and we hear and we read, first of all, they're all like Triple H is a racist, which is crazy. It's all business.
My God. Yeah.
And then you hear them say, oh, he's not the boss. They're telling I read somewhere where someone said they give him a list of names, and that's who you have to use, and that's who you have to work with, which is crazy. Like saying he can't hire, fire, and all kinds of. It's crazy. These smart marks that think they know what's really going on that actually have no clue about how the business works at all.
I have a feeling that it's a number, and this
Yeah.
is the budget number, and this is where we need to be. And Triple H fights
Right.
that fight on a case by case, on a big number business, big number situation, and then a case by case. So what you're telling me is that I have to, well, let's just hypothetically say here, I have to let go of R-Truth based around this number that you're giving me, and they're like, the number's the number. Could be that scenario.
Right.
It could be, and again, he didn't fire, nobody got fired in R-Truth's case. R-Truth decided not to re-sign with the company. They did not come together on a number. So that happens. Happens in New Japan, by the way. Tetsuya Naito was a main eventer and an IWGP Heavyweight Champion, one of the biggest stars in the company. They couldn't come together on a number because as the wrestlers age, their value goes down. Sure. And so you either come to work for New Japan for this when you used to make this, or you can do your own thing, go to Noah, go to the independents, produce your own shows, whatever. And that's what Tetsuya Naito decided to do. Is that the same case here with R-Truth? Not sure. Wasn't, I'm not sure of the economic situation. I know exactly what happened with Naito. And I think that when you look at what Triple H's position is, sometimes he has to make that unpopular. He's the face behind the unpopular decision, and they can create the boogeyman if they want, the straw man and TKO or whatever. But Triple H is the face of that. He's the one who poses with them, the picture, celebrates them with the picture, the guy with the headset on and the documentary. So he's in the heat spot. And he has people above him, and that heat spot is good some days and not good other days. Yeah, I think they could sit down and do press conferences. It's more real sport now than ever before when it comes to that. The economic realities of football and basketball. And there's times where you roll out the owner, the general manager, the whomever, and you sit there and go, we didn't want to let go of our favorite player and our quarterback or whatever, but salary cap, whatever, predicated that now we had to make this decision and we move on. And they take questions from the press, and it's tough.
Speaking about the press and stuff, so do you think Tony Khan had anything to do with all these press junkets now after the matches? Now I see WWE's doing it.
Yes, I do think so. I think so.
What's your thoughts on those?
I wish it was less inside. I wish it was more, but I don't want it to be hokey storyline driven. There is a way to answer a question, Casey, and you and I both know this. There's a way to answer a question and not insult a smart fan or a wrestling reporter with your answer without telling them how the sausage is made and taking away every illusion and showing them all behind the curtain. Tony has become very Derek Jeter-esque in giving non-answers. It's a big circle, which is fine. But I just hate guys coming up there and talking about how great their opponent is and blah, 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 and how much fun it was to put this match together and all the stuff that we wanted to do. I'm not a fan of that. Wow. But I do love a good wrestling press conference that's, on that line. You're not quite sure what's real, and you're not quite sure what's...
Did you enjoy them more when CM Punk was there?
Yes. And, well, that was uncomfortable to watch, right?
Well,
most of the time I was back in the hotel.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was asleep, so I didn't care. Because it doesn't involve me, and I didn't care. But yes, very enjoyable. I do like that.
Look how much the wrestling business has changed. There's no more of like your match is over and getting showered, this and that, and getting out. Now you have a press junket to do afterwards. Man, those poor rats. How long they gotta wait? There's
Honey,
no rats in AEW.
come on. I've got to go. My kids get up at 6. Just hold on, darling. I'm sorry. I got to stick around and answer a few
Were those
questions
press
from the press.
junkets over before the last call at the bar?
Sometimes not. You hope
Well,
that you're on.
Didn't they have a 4-hour show this week?
Yeah. And then he would sit there as long as he felt like it and would take questions. The press would be getting tired. And they would start to be like, all right, we're done. And Tony would keep going. It just
Well,
depended on
that
what.
reminds me of that the whole West Wing episode when Alan Alden was the governor running for president, and the power plant, the nuclear power plant from his state in California, and he went out there and just did a press thing. Finally, answer all the questions for hours, and the press were like, "We're out of here. We don't want to talk about it no
You
more."
can exhaust them, yes. So here's what's okay. So let's bottom line this for everybody as we wrap this up. Yes or no, Casey? Will R-Truth be the last name that is released? Will they change because of public perception? Or will they continue with letting go of other, not renewing contracts? I'm not really counting Carlito because he was kind of a part-timer. But let's say moving forward, are there other names that we're going to see no longer with the company? Yes or no?
Yes. I think it comes down to dollars and cents. Everyone has a dollar sign depending on how much their value is worth. I don't think they care about them. They don't. There's the relationships. I think the top guys might have their relationships, but everyone else in the company is just a dollar sign. If you can't produce this much, you're out.
I have a feeling that what we're looking at is kind of the gutting of the undercard of WWE, and the undercard will come from the NXT ranks. It'll come from the other companies and other relationships that they have around the world. Yes, there will be big names. There will be former world champions who are no longer with the company. Will Ron Killings reappear in TNA?
Man, it depends how much money he wants.
They
Does
don't
TNA
have money.
that kind of a budget? Yeah. I think there might be a better chance. The money's probably better in AEW right now for him. I mean, that would be as much as Tony Khan would be stupid right now if he wasn't talking to Rod Killings.
Right. I have a feeling that
everyone on the
happen.
internet's talking about him in the wrestling world. So, strike when the iron's hot. Get him on as soon as his non-compete is up.
All right. Does TKO take over and absorb more power from WWE, from the wrestling ranks, and will Triple H eventually be let go?
I saw that. It seems like a lot corporate America's taken over the wrestling, and I think that's a horrible mistake.
Yep.
Well, it's horrible, but it could be good. In my dream, and probably you would relate to it too, I could see and I would enjoy and like, because it would make a lot more work for a lot more people. Territories start popping back up if they're worried about just their little thing and that's it, because the market will be open for more shows, especially if their schedule gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So there might be opportunities for the opportunists out there that might want to start running shows and developing their own little territory. It would be cool to see. I'm down here in Florida. It'd be cool to see a 4 or 5 day week territory built up where they're doing their thing, because Florida's a spot where they can hit a show and get home. Will it ever be that way again? I doubt it, but I always can dream.
Yeah. And again, I'm promoting my own thing on Saturday, August the 9th,
Sure.
and it's going to be, it's a live, local, family-friendly professional wrestling show. And if it grows beyond that, I've already got idea. I want to do one around Christmas time because, it'd be so nice to give local kids like Christmas gifts and make sure that
Sure.
needy people for the upcoming, winter season, early December, it's cold, but it's not terrible yet. Just to make sure that they have everything that they need for the winter time as best we can, and find some families and, fix their furnace, fix their chimneys, make sure that they have what they need. All of that. That's all I care about doing. And of course,
that's the wrestling you want.
yeah. And the more people that we find need for, and the more events that we can run, then the more wrestling that we can present, where the wrestling is secondary and the boys can just, hey, house show, boys. Okay, babyface is over. Yes, sir.
Another thing, is it you think WWE is going to go, you know what, we don't need all these, we need our top guys, but we can filter in, other organizations, guys on a nightly deal. We don't have to worry about paying someone a downside guarantee, anything, because when you get a nightly guarantee, there's no residual income ever coming back in. You don't
Yeah.
get no merchandise, you don't get no video, anything.
And that's where the relationship with TNA works to their advantage. They can use the TNA guys as card filler.
Yeah.
They can use a AAA as card filler. NXT. Now those guys are under contract, but it's a different deal. But yeah,
Right.
if TKO decides that they want the top 20 guys and the top 10 or 15 women, and that's it, and everybody else is released, that could very well be it. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't come back and work. It just means that they wouldn't be getting a guarantee. They would come back on a nightly, which I would imagine would be a pretty good payday. Like, they're not going to come back for $250.
No,
but
I
they
can
might
see them
get like
paying about
2,500.
$750. That depends who it is. I think
Yeah.
if a TNA guy or a AAA guy comes, they're getting $500, $750 a night. They don't have to pay them,
Right.
high. I mean, it's all about how generous, the WWE wants to be with their nightly payoffs.
Well, I think that Casey Thompson deserves a weekly check from Norman Smiley, Esquire, for the fact that you got him his job 20 years ago. So that's that's going to put a wrap on this edition of the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. We've got some big plans coming up here over the next few weeks, Casey. I'm excited about the different directions that our storytelling and our memory banks are going to go. We're going to reveal some really, really interesting tales here to the folks.
Yes. I just talking to one of my friends. He's like, I thought you just talked about enhancement guys on this. I'm like, man, we go all over the place.
Yeah.
We.
Mr. Perfect told me, he said, Kevin, we're all jobbers. And
that's true.
That's it, because there was one guy in charge. And that's really the way this is. And obviously, enhancement guys and enhancement memories are at the core of what we do. But we need to talk about the current product, because things that happen today have happened before and will happen again. And
wrestling's a big vicious cycle.
It is. And I don't want anybody to think that, first of all, Ron Killings has, been betrayed, stabbed in the back by his best friends. He's been robbed blind. He's destitute. He's, selling pencils on a street corner. No, this is just a business decision, and he's going to move on, and he'll cash in, I would say, probably pretty likely with AEW, and there's nothing wrong with that, or at the very least on various independent promotions. And then after a little while, if the business in WWE changes, he'll be the first one they call back, because he's so damn entertaining. And there isn't any reason he couldn't be back on a nightly basis.
He's got 20 years of independence, conventions, all that stuff. By that time, he'll be done and gone. And so he's fine.
Yeah. He could do the convention circuit and sell and sign those action figures that he sold over the years, and all the things that the people have been able to get to about him. And he will do very, very well. Yeah, so that's going to do it for this edition of the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. We'll be back with more stories and more memories and more thoughts about everything in the world of professional wrestling when we rejoin you next week for Casey Thompson. I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next time.